Hey guys, welcome back to the JW Weatherman Show. Today I am doing an interview as part of my Cypherpunk series. But today is somebody that's kind of a little bit more of a modern day young guy that's still active in a way that some of the guys like Tim May who have paid their dues are not. And that is Giacomo Zucco. So a lot of you guys already know him, but yeah, thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. It's an honor to be listed close to the sacred holy names that you just had on your interviews.
Yeah, I really have been lucky. So as part of this sort of series, I've interviewed Tim May, Jim Bell, and then Bill Scannell. And so you're the fourth guy. I'm hoping to get some of the younger generation of cypherpunks to kind of tell their story and connect it to the history. You seem like a perfect choice.
Honor to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I tell you what, why don't you just give me a definition of what a cypherpunk is first, so we could get started? Because there's probably a lot to unpack just in that.
That's kind of easy because there is a Cypherpunk manifesto. So it's one of the few cases in which you don't really have to make a lot of effort in order to try to identify the movement. It's a movement which is basically concerned about privacy in the digital era, and especially the loss of privacy that we would face if the internet era was not balanced with strong privacy and strong cryptography tools and strategies. So basically, as everybody knows, the terms comes from a joke on cyberpunk, which is a dystopian literature movement about big governments and big corporations controlling everybody via cyberspace. And the idea is to revert that using cryptographic tools in order to make the internet private again. And actually, the movement overlaps with crypto anarchism, which is not just a defensive movement like we should get privacy back from the digital era, but it's actually something further. Like we can advance human liberty, human freedom more because we have the technological tools to do that now, because we can basically dissociate our physical persona from our internet name and or NIME, and the NIME is not vulnerable to physical threat of violence because you cannot find him, so you cannot shoot him in order to give you his money or his freedom. So I mean, right now in Bitcoin, the ethical aspects are not just strictly cypherpunk. They are mixing, and that's a very interesting analysis to do. They are mixing aspect of the original cypherpunk proposition with newer and or older tradition like Austrian economics and sound money and libertarianism in general, crypto carnivorism, and a lot of other stuff. But originally, the strong part of cypherpunk, as from what I understood, reading a lot of years later the holy textbooks, was privacy, basically.
Yeah, that is. I'm so glad that you're the guy I'm interviewing, because what you just said is way more clear thinking than anything that I've been able to parse together. The way that just to give a little bit of context, the way that I came to call myself a cypherpunk is I was really into software security for a long time. Then I was really into Austrian economics and begrudgingly became a Rothbardian anarchist. And then after those two things were really clear, and looking at Bitcoin, realized that it pulled it all together. And so then I went back and I looked at stuff that I had seen before, like the Cypherpunk Manifesto, and I read it with those eyes. And so I expected that everybody that was a cypherpunk was a Rothbardian. And then when I went back and talked with Tim May, and you can kind of see me going through this exploration of, trying to figure out where I'm at in the jungle, realizing that, yeah, Tim May, actually, I would classify him as an anarchist, but not directly influenced by Rothbard. Came at it from almost sci-fi was a big part of that journey for him. And Ayn Rand was more of an influence than probably Rothbard, which still kind of blows my mind. And then finding out guys like Whit Diffie are they're concerned about privacy, and they're they're still very much pro-state from what I've been able to gather, like social democrat sort of thing.
Yeah.
So are you saying that how confident are you in that distinction? And would you say that Tim May is a crypto anarchist, even though he wrote the Cypherpunk manifesto, and maybe that's where some of the overlap or confusion comes in?
I think that there is probably the crypto anarchist movement is probably more political. It's closer to anarcho-capitalism and libertarianism. Maybe the main point to make before we go further into this discussion is that if reality exists and if logic exists, then there is something true and there is something false. So it's not I don't consider it a chance that people that can come from very, very different backgrounds and very, very different cultures can arrive, like in science, you can arrive to the same discovery from very, very different approaches, and you can discover quantum physics from thermodynamics problem, or from electrodynamic problems, or from logical problems like von Neumann did. So the same thing is for me libertarianism. If you try to be strict and logical and reasonable, avoiding contradiction in ethics and politics and economics, you kind of arrive there, maybe with some minor deviations, but you kind of arrive there without any kind of other possibility. So I think that the crypto anarchist movement was more explicitly anarchist. Of course, it has the specific goal to try to eliminate the classical government violence, while the cypherpunk movement was still had stronger flavors of left-wing libertarianism, social anarchism, something closer to what you could find maybe in a European hacker circles. Like if you go to in Germany to the CCC, the Chaos Computer Conference, that you can find the hacker culture, which is basically very, very progressive, left-wing, and kind of tolerant about the idea of government, state, and big government. They are more anarchist toward social norms, which is something that especially paleo-libertarians like Rothbard actually tend to defend, if not to identify with. So usually a paleo-libertarian is okay with social constructs like moral, families, traditional traditions, while the typical European hacker is often iconoclast and rebellious against this, let's say, opt-in and free market construct, and also against corporation and business, especially, like profit is the devil. And then they tend to be more tolerant instead about organized violence of the state. So probably when you say crypto anarchist, you are probably identifying a subculture that coming from the typically liberal cypherpunk tradition is refining the logic more and more until it comes very, very close to what I would say is just reasonable and common sense without contradiction.
Okay, so I'm going to push back on that a little bit, but before I do, I know that there's some of the audience right now that is like, why are these guys just talking about words? And so for those guys, I want to point out that the reason that philosophers and people that care about ideas talk about words is that words allow us to define an idea. They allow us to define a concept. And once we've done that, then we can talk about that idea or that concept in one word. And everybody does that in their daily life. But you have to develop a certain amount of discipline and willingness to dig in and spend time working on one or two words if you're going to be able to think clearly in life. So this is not a divergence. It's very, very important. And if this is hard for you, stick with us because it will pay dividends. Okay, so I'm going to push back on the idea that the cypherpunks were not anarchist, because if you look at the Cypherpunk manifesto, it's a lot about privacy. But if you read the Cryptonomicon, the FAQ that was all on the Cypherpunk mailing list, I would say, and this is maybe an exaggeration, but it seems like every 10th question is relating to anarchism or libertarianism and why it's so crazy on this mailing list and why these guys are completely against government. And Tim May and, Jim Bell is not necessarily one of the leading figures on that mailing list, but his ideas were discussed extensively with his assassination politics, which is very much an anarchist. It's an attempt to create an anarchist solution to the problem of personal defense. So everything that was going on seems to be like that. So the reason that I'm pushing back is I'm wondering how confident that you are, and I'm also trying to navigate it myself. My working theory has been that it was kind of a big tent thing, that Tim May was definitely an anarchist. A lot of the guys were anarchists. Jim Bell was obviously an anarchist, and that's why he was popular with that audience. But there were a lot of people that made really important contributions that were not anarchists, but were still part of the movement. And I think part of the reason that I really like that idea is I'm trying to figure out how we do that in Bitcoin to a degree even now. If that is what was effective, right? If somebody like Whit Diffie, that was a social democrat, could be responsible for us having public key cryptography, how do we go about, on one hand, being really clear that, the 10 commandments is one way to get to don't steal and don't kill, but also just logic and reason is another way. And you could get to it pragmatically just by trying to figure out how do we organize society. So there's all these ways that you would end up at that truth, and be really clear that, coercion is not okay. But at the same time, know that we can be a lot more productive if we don't just exclude the participation of people where we do have overlapping views. For example, lots of liberals believe in personal privacy. Great, let's work on that together. But we're still cypherpunks, we're still anarchists, and where we overlap, that's fine, but we're still going to be clear about what we believe. So what do you think about that pushback, that there isn't a clear distinction between those two ideas?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a blurry distinction, and my main point was exactly that while many of the prominent advocates of cypherpunk movement were indeed logic, and so they were indeed anarchists, many of the people participating to the cypherpunk movement were not. Just like in Bitcoin today, I think that the parallel, that the comparison you trace is very, very meaningful. Like, for example, there is something other there. Basically, cypherpunk write code, right? So it's not just an ideological movement, especially the cypherpunk one. It's a pragmatical movement in which you have to be able to do some kind of ethical and political elaboration, but also then to contribute with working code to what you are doing, because it's not just a circle of philosophers, it's a circle of hackers and doers and makers and people that can write code. That's an important distinction, because then you can have a guy which may be, there is division of labor. So maybe somebody is better at abstract thinking and is better at elaborating the general theory in a more consistent way, while somebody else is maybe a little less consistent, especially when the consequences of logic reasoning is going against his, I don't know what his elementary school teacher told him, what his mother told him, what his priest told him, what his grandfather told him, or what was his first impression of political division in high school or university. So we tend to create very strong bias, and some of us are better than others at creating high-level, logical, consistent frameworks like Rothbard was and other people are, while somebody else maybe just because they are not so good at super abstract thinking, they are very, very good at implementing stuff and at coding and doing engineering work. And a movement that is based on production of code, of working code, desperately needs that people as well. So while in a more generic philosophical circle you can get away with a strong filtering about abstract thinking, in something like cypherpunk and Bitcoin, Brian, we will start to drop name not just of past past mythological figures, but also about everyday Bitcoin contributors. But this is not done in order to accuse anybody, just to try to get some kind of topology. Brian Cohen, the creator of BitTorrent, make great contribution to everything we are doing now. Bitcoin has a lot of depth with BitTorrent. I was discussing with Brian Cohen, and he's basically a half Keynesian, mainstream half Keynesian economist when it comes to economy, and he tolerates the idea of government. He sees no contradiction between government and ethical principle. So I would call him a statist in my very strict definition of non-statism. And Luke Dashier, Luke, I love Luke, and most of the disagreement you can have with Luke Dashier is about the definition itself of government. So Luke is very, very big on using a consistent and very, very narrow definition of words that it doesn't really bother about sharing beforehand. So you can get to strong disagreement, apparent strong disagreement, while actually it all depends on the way he's redefining words in ways that are accurate but not very common, let's say. Peter Todd, when we discussed, called himself an extremist centrist, and this kind of, it's anti-government, but it's kind of okay with democracy and stuff like that. And so when you have a movement which is not just based on producing philosophy, but is based on producing stuff that works, you need to be somehow more tolerant about idiosyncratic pro-government bias in specific very, very good engineers. And that's a price you pay in order to have people that can do something and not just thinking about something. I would say that probably the balance, the equilibrium point, is that you cannot compromise in things that impact directly the things you're working on. So when some Bitcoin developers like Mike Hearn starts to promote blacklist in order to avoid crime with the blockchain, when Zucco says that there should be ways to distinguish illegal activities and to censor it from the legal activity. So these are like Zucco is a cypherpunk, at least historically. These are red flags that we should probably raise, and these are probably barriers that we should probably keep standing. If you're going to promote something that directly contrasts with our goal of more liberty inside the project we are working on, then that's a no-go. While if you are just disagreeing strongly with the libertarian principle about something else, but that doesn't impact anyhow Bitcoin. So, for example, I don't know, Matt Corallo is not an anarchist at all. He really believes it. We were discussing about ICOs, and one of his concerns about ICOs is that they are illegal, which is not my concern at all. I would be more than happy with a global illegal capital movement, which is absolutely outside the reach of the SEC and of any other regulator. So there is some kind of what I would call inconsistency, but these guys are too good to do without them. So we have to basically probably restrict the requirement of consistency in the specific things that are directly impacting, in this case, Bitcoin, in that case, the privacy movement. So strong privacy without compromise. So I don't care if you believe in socialism as an idea, as long as you agree with me that we need strong privacy without backdoors, without any kind of compromise.
I love that. I love that way of describing it. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking, like, we the Rothbardian anarchists, we understand that we need to have a house because we're going to die in the winter if we don't have a house. And we're not going to exclude you, even if you don't know that we need a house or you don't know how insulation works. And as long as you don't try to put a door on the roof you can swing the hammers and you can participate, and we'll be appreciative and we'll welcome you in. We'll probably try to explain to you the pros and cons of, not having a house in the winter, but as long as you're swinging the hammer, we're not going to get rid of you because we're trying to survive here. And I think there's a ton of wisdom in that approach, man. Let me ask you this, and I can tell already that this is going to be more than one conversation, because I feel like I've already learned more in the last 15 minutes than I have in the last 3 days. But let's stick with kind of exploring the ideas, and if we get time, then we'll talk about how you came to them, because I really do want to talk about your background and figure out how somebody ends up as brilliant and interesting as you are. And I think there's a ton of value in that. But right now, I just want to pick around in your brain as it sits more. So let me ask you this: what do you think about the way that the cypherpunk movement developed? Because Murray Rothbard died shortly after the cypherpunk movement got started, or I mean, there was enough overlap, right? There was probably a good 7 or 10 year overlap. I don't think he died until like 94 or something like that. But either way, there was a lot of overlap with folks like Tim May as far as their lifetimes, and they really, like, Tim May didn't really interact with his ideas. I think he interacted with Rothbard through, if I'm remembering back in the interview, through the Friedmans, who in my mind stole a lot of Rothbard's ideas and presented them as their own, and distorted them a little bit. And maybe that's not fair, but that's my working understanding of because I don't remember reading anything that they said that was particularly new that wasn't already said by Rothbard. You could probably make that claim of other people to a degree with Rothbard as well. So, but what I'm wondering is, what do you think happened there where it seems like there's such a disconnect? I know that part of it is looking back and realizing that the internet didn't exist. Here's another way of saying it. The way that I understand the cypherpunk movement versus the broader libertarian movement, and the broader libertarian movement I would associate with Rothbard, and the cypherpunk movement I associate with Tim May. In my mind, the difference is that the guys in the broader libertarian movement missed a key insight that the cypherpunks picked up. And that key insight is that we're never going to get rid of central banking and all of the other versions of slavery that we currently operate under, unless technology moves it forward and changes the game. That we're not going to be able to do it through like just political activity and education and things like that. That it is fundamentally going to be a technological change of the battlefield that allows the individual to be empowered. And I think that the cypherpunks got that really, really clearly. So I'm kind of wondering why it hasn't. One, what do you think happened back then where it does feel like there's these two very, like, we all have the same goal, but very different approaches. And there's not, like, the Mises Institute right now is happening. Somehow Adam Back is not a speaker. Like, how does this happen, right? Is part of what I'm getting at, because it's still a modern day concern. But what's your theory on kind of what happened back then and how it relates to the landscape of cypherpunks and libertarians today?
So my theory is that while fundamental issues are probably easier to sort out with pure logic, and Rothbard was very, very good at that, in my opinion. I don't think that Rothbard was perfect about logic. I think that some of the things Rothbard said, for example, about kids and abortion and property over children, is totally unlogical. But still, even if I have many very selective disagreement with the fundamental principle of Rothbardianism, I still think that that's fairly, there is some objectivity in what you can argue with logic in that regard. But when it comes to strategy, so when you're not talking about your the principles and the goals to go closer to the principle, but you're talking about the strategy to get there, that's not an exact science. There is a lot of art and a lot of creativity, and everything is questionable basically there. And you can change your mind a lot about the best strategy, and you can be, we can be both wrong, very, very wrong about strategy, or both right in a way. There could be complementarity, or things could change very, very fast. So Rothbard's strategy to implement libertarian ideas went through basically two big phases. And one was the big phase of the basically of the new left, and one was the phase of the old right. So in one phase, Rothbard was associating himself with the hippie movement and the anti-government, anti-war movement of, let's say, the new left. So we are for individual freedom, we are for peace against war, but we are like, peace and love and drugs and everything. And that generated the movement that Rothbard himself later called the modal libertarians. So the libertarians that don't really care about the extension of state intervention as far as they can, as long as they can just smoke some pot and whatever. So when he created the libertarian movement, it was when he helped to create the libertarian movement and party in the US, it was mostly in this phase of the alliance with the new left. Then he switched to the alliance with the alt-right, so like stricter, like paleo-libertarianism. So we are not against the family and religion and traditions. We're not rebellious kids that just want to smoke some joints. We are here to destroy central banking and the military industrial military complex and stuff like that. So the second phase was most about getting close to the what today we could call the alt-right, even if the alt-right is an entirely different thing with the internet and memes. So yeah, it's not proper. But anyway, it was closer to the right-wing policy, and that was mainly the two phases for what I can understand, simplifying, of course, of his activity. There was never the phase about getting completely outside of the political polarized debate. So even if Rothbard didn't believe in democracy and election, he maintained his view of strategies inside the strictly election related political debate. So it was really thinking about spreading ideas mostly, and interfering and interacting with the political process, strictly speaking. While the people that elaborated the Rothbardian theories more in the side of the action entirely outside the political system, were the agorist guys, basically. So I could say that agorism is probably the linking. It's the link, the missing link between Rothbardian libertarianism and the cypherpunk movement. The cypherpunk movement was basically a one-issue movement, so mostly about privacy on the internet. Then, of course, it evolved, including other things, but it was mostly one issue. And the strategy of the cypherpunk movement was let's create technological weapons and tools in order to achieve our liberty without trying to get that from some representative of congressman. While the Rothbard approach, you always have personal biases, right? And he was a professor. He was used to talk about ideas and about people talking about ideas, and he was not a coder. And it's very, very difficult to create a strategy based on technological action if you are yourself incapable of technological action, because you are not technologically advanced enough. So I would say that probably the link could be found in agorism, where people started to think that the fundamental ideology of agorism was anarcho-capitalist libertarianism, Rothbardian 100%. There was not any difference in ideology, but there was a difference in strategy. Instead of just spreading ideas and fighting over ideas and creating institutes and influencing parties and creating maybe tax pledges and stuff like that, we just avoid the political process altogether, and we create technological tools, and also we leverage selfish incentives of people. So everybody is libertarian when it comes to his freedom, and everybody tends to be a little bit statist when it comes to other people's freedom. So agorism is more an incentive-based strategy that finally came very, very close to the cypherpunk idea, but probably coming from different angles. I will push back a little bit about what you said about the Friedmanites and Chicago School. I don't think that they mostly copied Rothbard. I think that they also came to the same rational conclusion, starting from a super different point that was the public choice theory. And so they were studying economics from a very, very empirical point of view. So with a completely different methodology from the Austrian axiomatic research, they were just looking at data, and they developed some theory about public choice and about interference of government in economy. And then they arrived, and it's not the case that after Milton Friedman, it came David Friedman and then Patrick Friedman. And now Patrick Friedman is very, very close to the Bitcoin ecosystem and to the Bitcoin revolution. So Bitcoin is kind of a unifier of good things. There is there are some very advanced Chicago school people. There is a very, very strong, probably majority cypherpunk movement, which still has some elements of not pure anarchism inside it. And then there is the Austrian tradition, very, very strong in Bitcoin. And then there are other movements, like there is the Silicon Valley open money movement, like Peter Thiel and stuff like that. Let's create. It's not anarchism at all, but it's like a implicit anarchism. Billionaire impreneur of Silicon Valley that are disrupting everything. So Uber style libertarianism, Airbnb style libertarianism. We are fighting the government because we can create better tools, and they are builders, not thinkers, and they somehow can. I mean, it's a continuous. It will be fun to try to draw a map of many political traditions merging into Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I may have overstated the case with the Friedmans a little bit. My general methodology is if somebody tells me, John Nash is amazing or Milton Friedman's amazing, I go and I read their stuff, and when they say something that's interesting, if it's way after the other guys that I've already read, if it's a decade later, I'm not saying that they stole it from him. I'm just saying you've contributed nothing to me, right? Like, I don't think that you contributed anything. Maybe you came at it from a different angle, and I'm sure there's some nuances after 30 years of academic work that you have contributed. But I would say in general, I don't see a whole lot of progress between Rothbard in the late or even in the early 70s and the cypherpunk movement. So, but that's we can debate that another time.
Yeah, that's probably going to go out of topic. But just as a quick mention, I will say that Ronald Coase and neo-institutionalism is something original that Rothbard incorporated, but it was missing in Mises and in Menger and Hayek. So the Ronald Coase vision of the firm as an emerging tool in order to avoid transaction costs was something that was coming from outside the Austrian tradition. So something useful.
Yeah. Big picture. I mean, there has certainly been work. I'm oversimplifying, but the full-fledged anarchism was all present in Rothbard in the early 70s, and I think the only major thing right from there that was missing was the idea of and like you said, I actually like your explanation of when it comes to strategy, we're all just kind of flailing around and we're trying to find out what works. But I tend to think that the strategy of technology, and that's because I have the benefit of hindsight, it's more than just strategy at this point. I think it's in hindsight. In hindsight, I think it's a philosophical concept that we should have identified, that humanity isn't going to change, but our tools can change us and our tools can change the environment. And so education probably wasn't going to get us there, but technology is something that could and would. But that's that for me, that's the missing piece in Rothbard that I see guys like Tim May really bringing into play. And again, I'm sure there's small stones that are very valuable between there, but from my perspective, at the 50,000 foot view, at least, that seems to be the major peaks of the ideas that really matter. So let me ask you this then.
Sorry, time out just a second. I see that I have 8 minutes of battery charge. So since you can edit this video, I should probably go to take the charger before, because when I switched the room, I didn't think about this.
Awesome.
I'm coming back in a second.
Do it. Thanks, dude.
Ci degnassi della tua presenza.
Okay. Okay, I'm back and connected to the power.
Cool. Okay, so my question to you is, now that we have the benefit of hindsight, right, and we can see that Bitcoin seems to be, to guys like you and me, obviously the best hope that we have of creating a world in which there's a lot more freedom, and there's the end of central banks, and there's all the things that that the Mises Institute and all the anarchists / libertarians really care about. It seems very obvious at this point that Bitcoin is our best hope. We have Trump as president in the United States. We're probably going to have Hillary Clinton or somebody similar as president next year. Our confidence in that way of changing the world seems to be at an all-time low in general. Bitcoin, on the other hand, its price is at an all-time high. Well, relatively speaking, and it's making massive strides. And it's had 9 years to be attacked by all the people that we thought could destroy it. So from my perspective, at this point in history, it seems very obvious that that's our best hope. And maybe even that it was always going to be our only hope, was a technological advancement, and we should have focused our energy there. What do you think is going on now, where there's such a huge gap between the Bitcoiners and the rest of the libertarians?
Well, first of all, I will just clarify that probably Bitcoin alone, for me at least, Bitcoin alone is not enough to win the battle consistently. For example, after the American Revolution, it was an economical system and the guns of the colonists that were able to push the English back. So it was action, not discussion, that changed it. But the fact that the American colonies were pervaded by the Lockean ideas about liberty and property, that's contributed to you need instruments, you need tools to tear down the regime, but you need culture in order to build something better after. So in the case of Bitcoin, of course, the destruction of central banking and hyperinflation and monetary manipulation and partially of tax extortion is itself probably something that will make very, very difficult to create governments as we know them. But without a proper culture, you could still end up in a situation which is, if not worse, in some way as bad as the previous one. So I think that while the political solution, so let's elect this guy that will free the markets, is very, very naive and very, very disingenuous. And now finally, as you said, people of every kind of political provenience, they're starting to understand that the political way to change the world is basically naive. I think there is the political discussion, there is the cultural discussion with the Mises Institute and stuff like that, and then there is the technological revolution with Bitcoin or other things like 3D printed guns, like Cody Wilson is doing. So it's not just Bitcoin, but it's a broader technological decentralization movement that can help liberty. What is happening now between Bitcoiners and the rest of the libertarians? Well, actually, there is a funny thing. I think right now, in the very, very short term, I can find some kind of tendency of non-strictly Bitcoiner libertarians to get fooled easily by all the scam coin ecosystem. So right now, I don't happen to find a lot of libertarians that are anymore anti-Bitcoin, strictly speaking. Like just in 2015, many libertarians were like totally anti-Bitcoin because it's, Mises regression theorem is not real money. We should, totally anti-Bitcoin. Well, right now I have a hard time finding libertarians who are anti-Bitcoin, but I can find, unfortunately, a lot of libertarians that are pro scam coins. So they are pro Bitcoin and pro everybody else and everything else, which is mostly just scams. Especially there are like very, very deep, some scams, some frauds. So I'm trying to find a nice way to put it, but libertarians tend to be easily gullible because they are anti-system. They tend to be a little bit paranoid. They are minority. They know they are minority. They are used to lose always. So every time they find something, somebody who is promoting the same idea, they tend to lower the barrier to trust very, very much. I do the same. I did the same, and I did a lot of mistake because if you just throw some libertarian jargon at me, I will tend to trust you too easily. And so that happened, and many libertarians got scammed by, in Chile, the Gals Coach. There were a lot of frauds targeting libertarians specifically. And scam coins are not different from legacy frauds. And so many scam coins are targeting libertarians specifically as a target for their scams. There is Dash mostly, but specifically Bcash, Bitcoin Cash. They are really targeting libertarian, not technologically advanced libertarian, as a victim of their scams. So right now, I don't think we meet a lot of anti-crypto libertarians, but we meet a lot of scam coin pushing libertarians. That's a problem only for the short run, in my opinion. I don't think that this political attack can really hijack the Bitcoin revolution. It can slow it down a little bit. It can create a little bit of confusion, waste some resources. But in the end, if Bitcoin was really successful, if Bitcoin was really vulnerable to this kind of social attack, then it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So I'm not really concerned about that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think that that guys like the Mises Institute, they're going to go through a phase of being excited about scam coins before they finally relinquish the idea that gold is a good money and embrace something like Bitcoin?
It's possible. I would not be surprised if we could find an example in which they already have been. Like Mises Institute has a lot of contributors, and some of those contributors, I am not sure. I cannot find an example just now, but I will not find unlikely that there is some contributor to the Mises Institute that was pricing Bitcoin Cash narrative. You have Roger Ver and like Vim Armani and even my friend Jeffrey Tucker that I really like. But Jeffrey Tucker is pumping scam coins a lot. And these are not Roger Ver, but in most of cases, they are good people, well-meaning, but they just underestimate hard problems. So that they see all these technology stuff like magic. So they're coming from the non-technological tradition. So they're coming from the purely political and cultural tradition. So they accepted that technology can change the world, but they see it as a magic thing that just happens, and there are no trade-offs, no limitation, and every kind of technological debate is stupid because we can do everything for free forever. So like ultra optimism about technological advancement, which is the opposite of what we need to build a solid, sound, censorship-resistant form of money.
I don't say this all that often, but you're definitely more generous than me when it comes to that stuff, because I have a tendency to think that it's just a simple check writing exercise that's happening there. But maybe you're right. Maybe it does tend to be people that are not technologically competent. But I also am willing to bet, and the few times that I've dug into it with my own particular heroes, and I stopped because it was so depressing after antiwar.com, there was money, and I was able to follow the money. And so maybe that's why I'm a little bit jaded, because my own particular heroes died early in my Bitcoin career. But let me ask you this. So when you say that tools and politics, do you think that tools and politics and education, do you think all of those things are useful, or do you think that that it is the right approach? Tim May has this phrase. I think he used it in the interview, but maybe it was in my discussions with him that weren't recorded, but of setting up card tables, right? And he just has a complete disdain for that concept of setting up card tables. And it could be political, it could be sort of educational-ish, but the idea that you're going to set up card tables and you're going to hand out pamphlets and you're going to have conversations with people and change anything is pretty much repulsive and stupid to him. Are you more of that perspective, or do you think that it needs to be both, right? We need to change the culture, and we need to have a sound culture in order for the tools to be used properly? Where do you fall into that?
So I think that we should use both. So tools and culture. I think that tools alone can bring us to some kind of other local maximum of efficiency, which is not libertarian at all. I know that there are few ways in which central banking can survive Bitcoin, and there are few ways in which strong modern statism can survive central banking, the defeat. So like the future is written and we have already won, but that's not really the case. I think that there are configurations that we don't imagine yet, in which things get ugly, maybe not in the typical nation state statism of the last 2 centuries, but I can see people without any culture in property and liberty and rights using tools, even tools that are programmed and created in order to be used for the best, use it actually for the worst. So I think that tool building and culture will have to go and to go on together. About politics, strictly speaking, so political parties and stuff like that, I have mixed feelings about that, and I was tending toward a positive answer few years ago, and I'm more and more tending toward a negative answer, because logic says that if you want to spread, even if you cannot reduce the state power with political initiative, that's impossible, because the political game is built by the government in order to increase the intervention of the government. So the government always wins from political debate and political parties. You cannot make libertarianism win. You can have some local aberration, like you can have Margaret Thatcher for a while, that will arguably reduce the role of government, at least in some spheres. But then overall, you are getting back to empower government even more. But one could say that you can use the government just as a sabotage tool. So you can use with lobbying, for example, you can have this single issue pro-Bitcoin legislation that will help Bitcoin winning, or you can have this pro-Second Amendment law that will allow people to keep weapons in order to fight back when the government will get tyrannical because it's not getting the money anymore from inflation and from taxes. So you can say that you can probably think that you can use the political system in order to not to really to advance freedom, but to reduce the damage of state in specific sector. And also you could probably kind of try to use political debate as an instrument itself to spread culture. So you're producing great culture with Mises Institute. If you have Ron Paul participating to the primary elections, then you will have prime time for the content of the Mises Institute. So the temptation could be, let's use politics just as a just as a microphone for our cultural initiative. The problem is that while the nation states are in power like they are now over everything, politics is too strong, so you cannot really hope to infect it without being infected by it. So I'm getting more and more skeptical. I still respect a guy that could try to use that is trying to use politics in order to advance liberty, but I'm growing really skeptical about his success odds, because if it stays too consistent, it will get marginalized, and when it tries to get more effective, it will give up consistency. Think about the K2 Institute and all the other think tanks that are getting more and more status every other year, because after a while, the purpose of the organization is to get influence, and to get influence, you have to give up consistency, and that's a game that I think in the long run we cannot win. So I think that we should write books and blogs and institutes, but probably the political activity itself, it looks attractive as a quick strategy, but it's lose-lose.
Yeah, my perspective on it is that politics is basically crumple zones for outrage. That it is designed to absorb. It's part of the slave system to have these ways that we can basically run ourselves out of energy, so that we don't actually make any progress. And I'm maybe the most extreme about this particular topic because of the way that I came in, and that was I did the threat model on Bitcoin, and then I immediately did a human threat model. And the conclusion that I came to there that made me really freak out and think that this matters is that my working hypothesis is that Bitcoin alone is enough to completely change the game. And as I look back at history, I don't know why it wasn't clear to me before. And maybe I'm wrong, but this is my working hypothesis, that it was always only technology that ever mattered, that it was the gun, that it was the Industrial Revolution, that it was things like this that didn't change the nature of man. Because we are still the same men that we were 2,000 years ago, but we had different tools, and that made us more dangerous to own as slaves, or less profitable, as in the case of the Industrial Revolution. It just didn't make sense anymore to beat people with a whip to get them to do work when manual labor like that was so cheap. I don't believe, for example, that we went through a spiritual awakening and ended slavery. I think that or racial slavery. I think that what happened is the economics changed. The tools that were available in the environment changed, and so our behavior changed. And my hope now is that Bitcoin is going to do that again, but maybe in such a fundamental way that theft itself on a mass scale, systematic theft, let's call it, is no longer cost effective. So I'm really curious if you think central banks can outlive Bitcoin, then I've definitely missed something that I want to hear about. So how could the state, actually, let's take it super high level. How does the state live in a world with Bitcoin?
Did I lost you first?
Oh, I'm still here. Yeah.
Sorry, I think I lost the last seconds. I don't know why.
Okay. Let me ask it more specifically then. How can central banks outlive Bitcoin?
No, actually, probably I didn't explain myself. I don't think that central banks are likely outlive Bitcoin. There are some hypotheses like central banks buying Bitcoin as a reserve asset, but I don't really find those hypotheses very, very likely. So I think that the central banks will not outlive Bitcoin, and I think that nation state as it is right now cannot meaningfully outlive central banking, because most of the resources are coming from inflation and monetary manipulation. So no, I perfectly agree that Bitcoin is probably enough to destroy the present day statist structure and dynamics. What I'm not sure about is that after this destruction, what we remain with is a libertarian paradise, or anyway, even not going so naive, is something radically better, if not for culture as well. But I mean, I disagree with you about being let's say, economical reductionist. I'm not an ideological reductionist, so I don't think that everything that matters are ideas. I don't think so. I think that incentives matter, and economics matter, tools matter, technology matters. But I don't think that ideologies and public speech and narrative and political narrative doesn't matter either. I would say that I could agree with you 100% if we include the social tools and the social technologies, let's say, and the narrative and political technologies inside the toolbox of Bitcoin. So
well,
if Bitcoin
so just to clarify, I think that Bitcoin is going to be the tipping point. It's enough, but we needed the internet. We needed all of these other also democratizing of power tools in order to get to the point where we could even build something like Bitcoin.
Yeah, but more than that, Bitcoin, I mean, during the NotWex, for example, debate, I think that what we witnessed was a system of social taboos and social reaction on. I mean, when somebody is trying to launch a scam coin, the reason it fails is not just that it is fundamentally broken. That's the reason it will eventually fail in the long run, in the long feedback loop. But the reason we can push back stronger and faster is also that we are building a culture on top of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not just code. I mean, without code, there is no hope. But Bitcoin is not just running code. It's also a culture, some memes, some taboos, some. We are part of the immunitary system of Bitcoin that in the long run, I think, will probably be completely decoupled by any kind of cultural movement. So in the end, Bitcoin will work because it works, like gunpowder or the printing press. But in this specific moment, I think that there are social tools included in the Bitcoin toolbox that are very important to the success in the long run of Bitcoin, because I can see moments in which, like, you cannot bootstrap Bitcoin without ideology. For example, nobody was interested in mining Bitcoin at loss at the beginning. You needed ideology as a first step, and then you get Silk Road, and then you get some gambling, and then you get other libertarians, and then you get other drug dealers, and then you get the hodlers that wants the digital gold in order to outperform the fiat money, and then you get the Venezuelan guys. But ideology is one of the tools that Bitcoin can leverage. So I can say that I disagree with you in the sense that technology alone without social constructs is not enough. But that's unless you include in your definition of technology and incentives and economics also the social gains, like the fact that you feel part of something, that you have fun and trolling people on Twitter. I think that dynamic, especially in the early phases, it could be even decisive.
Yeah, the way that I look at it is that that culture does matter, but I don't think that. I guess a better way to say it is, yes, we do need to have all of those things. We need to be able to communicate together, and we need enough people to be able to understand that SegWit2x was an attack, or that the block size is really dangerous, to run the right software, to run the right nodes. All of those things need to happen. But I don't think the nature of man has changed at all.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm completely against metaphysical libertarianism. Like, we will change the man in order for all the evil disappear from Earth. That's just impossible.
Right. So if man is the same, then and we need those coordinating activities to happen, how is it that we have those activities when we didn't have them before? I think the answer is that because the Industrial Revolution happened, we all have food in our bellies, and we have time to sit on Twitter and troll each other, and we have Twitter, right? We have Reddit. So it's really that we're the same empty-headed monkeys we were before. We've just over time discovered better and better tools that have affected our behavior. And that do result in our ability to protect something like Bitcoin socially, but that to me, even then it's Twitter, it's Reddit, it's the internet itself, it's radio. It's not, it's probably not that we all became philosophers and started reading Calvin and Rothbard, right?
It's not that people get smarter. It's that people is stupid, and people when people is stupid, people are stupid. They follow. They just blindly. I mean, on average, some individuals are smart, but on average, people are just blindly following the herd, and the herd cannot become smarter or more free to think by themselves. The herd remains the herd, but sometimes you can use herd hacking as a tool. I mean, religions, traditions, social taboos, they are all tools that you can implement along with technical tools. And I think that religion, I mean, Christianity could have changed the history of Europe, maybe as much as Industrial Revolution. And that Christianity was not, I mean, monasteries in the Middle Ages were not a technological revolution. They actually they influenced directly the technology because the monks were starting to copy the ancient books, and so it was an ideological change in the society that created a technological change, and not the other way around in that specific circumstances. So I think that I agree, but some kind of strong social dynamics are, I would say that they are part of the technological set.
Yeah. It's a for me, it's more of a question of cause and effect. Is the culture as it exists a result of the tools that we've developed, or did we develop the tools because of the culture? I tend to think it's the former. I'm actually glad you think it's the latter, or you probably wouldn't be taking.
No, sorry, not the latter. I think that I will go for a balanced double feedback mechanism. Okay. I don't think I'm not a cultural reductionist at all.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I definitely tend to at this point in time, but I'll be honest and say this is one of those things that I wouldn't have probably said as strongly 4 years ago. So it's not like it's a super long held belief, but at this point I would tend to be more of a reductionist in the sense that I think it's tools and technology that's affecting our behavior, and it's, you know, and the reason that I think that that's an important distinction is that moving forward, what should we focus on? I think we should focus exclusively on tools. I think even this discussion, right? Like there's a certain amount of what looks like inconsistency here. And I have done some soul searching, especially after I did the Tim May interview. I was like, what am I doing? Just digitally setting up card tables. But I realized that I am doing this for two reasons. One is I want to educate myself. That's probably 80% of the reason that I'm spending time with you right now. And the other is that I'm trying to push tools, right? I'm basically doing marketing right now. So I'm marketing for Bitcoin and I'm marketing for mathbot.com. And that's how I've resolved that. But clearly, you know, there's probably some inconsistency left there for sure.
That would be living a mission that culture can influence tools using marketing as a middle tool. So that's very interesting.
All right, maybe there's a circular loop there, but in my mind, I'm building tools, but I got to tell people they exist or they're not going to pick them up.
Sure.
But my end goal, my strategy, let's say, and I really like the way that you did frame that earlier, where there's truth and then there's strategy, and strategy is like trying to navigate a forest, and do you take the river or do you try to hack your way through the jungle? It's not clear. And we shouldn't fault anybody for guessing wrong. I think that's super, super helpful. I mean, 80% of the fights that I get in on Twitter and around Bitcoin or around strategy, like we all have the same goal, but we need to be a little more generous with letting people explore different strategies, I think. And that definitely applies to me. That stung a little bit as you were making that distinction. But yeah, I think.
Well, I'm very bad at that as well, because while I like differentiation of strategy models, I don't like instinctively. I don't like differentiation of strategy styles. For example, I don't like the compromise political correct style. I know that I acknowledge that it could be useful for certain goals. So it's legit to experiment with smooth compromise, nice, and I like the direct warrior trolling approach, and I have a very hard time in tolerating the other alternative. But rationally, I know that it makes sense.
Yep. I'm in the exact same boat. I logically, I appreciate the big tent approach, and I want to give people the freedom to do that, but it still turns my stomach, and I still have to walk away. But then on the other hand, I do something like number 2 coin, and people freak out, and I'm like, come on, man, give me some more freedom to experiment here. So, but I think, I guess as long as we can take a step back and distinguish between strategy and truth, and I don't want to steal your stuff, and I don't want to kill you, and I don't want anybody else to do that, and the way that I'm going about that might not be the right way, but at least that I'm trying to do good, whether I have the wisdom to do that optimally or not. And so you got to apply that to somebody like Rothbard as well, and say, the guy lived before the internet. Why am I frustrated that he didn't see technology was the obvious path forward? That's pretty absurd. So awesome, man. Well, this has been a really good chat. What I would love to do is get back together again and go back to you personally and how you came to these conclusions. I think what we did in this first hour, and in the past I've done like 2-hour plus interviews, but I know that people, they don't have as much stamina for these sort of things as I do. But what I'd like to do is do a second part, and now that we've established all of the ideology, figure out how the heck you got here. And I think that'll be a lot of fun.
With pleasure. Absolutely.
Awesome. Since I am only doing this because I'm trying to encourage people to use tools, and I think I've shilled Bitcoin in the process enough. Check out mathbot.com. Let's see. I'm going to display for the YouTube people. Check out mathbot.com. It is a open source for-profit project that's trying to destroy the public school system by going after the crown jewel that the state uses, that they pretend to teach kids math. And we're going to do our best to provide a free tool to everybody that makes it completely clear that you can learn math by programming a robot and have a lot more fun for free on our website. So you don't need to put your kids in that glorified daycare indoctrination camp of the state. Thanks a lot, guys. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Bye.